we've all had different experiences, right? So does it make any sense for you to be following in the same steps? Uh, so yeah, like it's just chasing advice without context will never ever make sense. And that's something a lot of students have to figure out, especially now that we're at a phase and at a point where um, mentorship as a service has become a very major concept,
Yes.
right? Yeah, that's one big thing. And then I think beyond that, it's just you need to further fine tune the context, because unless I know your problems, I can advise about them, right? It has to be very problem centric. It can't be very generalist in the sense that um, if we start going that general, anything I say is something you can Google. So does it actually add any value? From my experiences at that point is a major question as well.
Okay, so for an individual, first of all, they should find the context. Then they should ask or chase for the guidance.
Yeah,
So,
please,
uh,
like I have a problem before you ask for a solution, right? Don't start asking for solutions before you understand your problem.
yes, first of all, understand your problem, then find the solution. That's great, Aditya. That's great. So, moving forward to the next question, some practical tips to master public speaking, because I myself, few years back, have a stage fright, and many of my peers are not good at public speaking, as you have spoken at many conferences and events. So, what approach did you follow to gain such confidence and to master public speaking? Any practical tips that you would like to give? Because on YouTube, you can find many tips, strategies, but some tips that you have followed and that helped you really well to master public speaking that you would
I
like to
like
share.
that you shared this question because I've actually written about how to tackle stage fright.
Okay,
Um,
so can you share the link in the
yeah,
chat section?
yeah, absolutely. Um, I am just going to link it here. But yeah, I think the biggest thing to understand with stage fright and difficulties with public speaking is that um, it's not speaking in itself that is a worry as much as um, a fear of being misunderstood or a fear of being judged that triggers this issue. Um, and so I think the first thing that someone has to tackle is that specific fear and understand, you know.
Okay, yes, got it. That's great.
Then
But
along with that, of course, the only real actual way is doing it more and more. That's the biggest thing. Now there are ways you can manage it, but I would suggest that the first thing you do is actually start by getting on the stage. That's the only way you really. There's no way around that problem.
yes, you should
Beyond that,
gather the courage and just go out and put yourself out there and just start from somewhere. Okay, um, that's great. Aditya, your video just froze. Okay, now it's okay. Now it's okay. Maybe the issue is from my side. Now it's okay. So yes, next question. Tell us about some common mistakes which students often do, because I think that many students, as you spoke at many events, many students must ask from something, some kind of questions or queries. So you must have the answers to this question. Any kind of mistakes that you find that students nowadays often do, and that is not good, that you would like to share with us, so that uh, we we will not do that kind of mistakes by ourselves.
okay, I'm gonna reverse this back to you because it's been 2 years since I graduated. You
Okay.
tell me what you think are common problems students and common mistakes students make, and then we can tackle those.
Okay, so common mistakes students do. So the common mistakes students do is they didn't explore enough. They just find a particular technology. They think that this is it, whether it is DSA or web development. So they just stick to it. They didn't explore more enough to find out what is their interest. So I think this, in my opinion, is one of the common problem which students often do. They didn't explore enough, and yes, they just stick to the one technology they start learning in the first place. And yes, yes, this is the common problem, which I think.
It's a common problem that students will take one thing and stick to it. Here's my question: why is that a problem?
Okay, why
To
is
be really good at anything, you need to spend a lot of time at it, right? Why is
yes,
that a problem?
why is that a problem? Because they don't get exposure, because they don't get exposure to a lot of technologies. Everybody tell them that do DSA, you will get a placement and you will get a job. So they're just doing DSA. They're not exploring other fields because, as you know, there are a lot of things going on in the market nowadays as the AI emerges and the whole landscape changes from Web 2 to Web 3. Web 3 is also emerging. So there are a lot of technologies.
So here's my opinion on that. When you look at someone, I'll be honest, I think Ekansh has a very good point. I don't see sticking to one thing as a big problem as compared to people trying too many things and not being able to decide what they need to commit to. When we look at problems of you know with students who maybe spend time on one specific space, yes, like if they grow good at it, they're going to open enough opportunities for themselves, right? um, the option of experimenting and maybe or maybe not finding something that they like versus picking a guaranteed route and sticking to it is effective for most people, right? So the thing is that for like the risk of experimenting too much and not discovering anything um, does seem high to a lot of people, which is a very reasonable risk as well, right? At that point, here's the fact. Um, we talk about people spending all their time at data structures and algorithms practice. Well, yeah, the biggest tech companies you have out there, that is how they recruit. There is no changing that fact, right? So if that is how you want to make your career, um, you have to leverage and spend time on that front. Now, as far as experimentation goes, right? Personally, I did a lot of that. Um, I played around with cloud tech. I played around with cross-platform apps. I spent time with APIs. I tried creating my own blockchain as well at one point in the pre-Web 3 era. And experimentation has its pros for sure. But I would say that experiment till the point you find something you're good at is a good way. I mean, if you can figure that out earlier rather than later, that's always a better thing. It's not a problem if someone figures out one thing and sticks to it, right?
Right.
That's the thing. Now, that being said, um, I think Ekansh has a comment in the chat, which I think I'll be honest. I know Ekansh, I think he can add a lot more context on this because for me to spend more time on whether DSA is right or wrong is not going to be a good idea. I didn't make my career off DSA anyway. And the fact of the matter is, I am not a day to day software engineer, so my career did take a different direction. It it heavily benefits from experimentation, but that's the nature of the work I do. Um,
That's great, Aditya. That's great approach.
I
And
think Ekansh's point is actually really valuable.
yes,
Um, if you
definitely.
know a company is going to test for DSA and you start expecting something else, that's a problem as well. Which does happen when it comes to hiring challenges. You have enough people, or like DSA is a bad way to recruit, and they shouldn't do that. But if you know that's going to happen, then the expectation is a problem as well. So um, yeah, like I don't think it's a problem as if people stick to one thing. Experiment till you find something you're good at. If you can find something you're good at, you can invest time in it. You can grow your skills in it. You're gonna do well, right? Like you don't need to know everything. You need to just know, be aware enough about things and find one thing you're good at. That's okay for college.
Thanks a lot, Aditya. You just vanishes my blunder in which I'm living. Thank you so much. Um, that's Thank you so much, Akansh, as well for your thoughts. Now, next question. Uh, Students often find it difficult to manage their college and upskilling themselves. I know that you have recently graduated, and in your college days, you have done a lot of community work as well as upskill yourself. So, how did you manage these things in your college?
I was very lucky that we had a pandemic in the middle and we had virtual classes. That's the honest answer. Like a lot of what I did was simultaneous to classes. To be fair, I spent time my first 2 years outside college in clubs and things like that. And I have to say that when you time management is there, but you've got to decide, you know, you can't do everything. Now, when I do all of this, and if I'm spending time at hackathons, if I'm spending time with communities and open source and things like that, something is going to have a take a backstage. For me, that was my academics. I was not chasing something more than a 7.5 CGPA, and I was okay with that personally. You're gonna have to decide what you want to sacrifice, what matters more to you, and take a call, right? Because um, the truth is that for some people that's going to be more important than a hackathon, right? I have friends who spent more time with their classes. um, they worked and collaborated with faculty members, they spent time on research, they're doing their masters outside India right now, they're on scholarships because they did well in their academics and it works well for them, right? But you're going to have to take a decision as to what is valuable to you or not, and what isn't. um, and for that matter it has to be a very individual choice. You can't just um, follow everyone else's recommended path. Now yes, on that front, there are things you can learn about, like if you know that you want to be a software engineer at Microsoft and you know someone who's been at Microsoft, and you talk to them and understand how they work towards that goal, maybe there are going to be aspects that are valuable for you, right? But spending all your time in communities just because you want to be a conventional software engineer at Microsoft or Google is not always going to be the solution. The fact of the matter is the community answer does not work for most things from a career perspective, at least at an entry level, in terms of you getting a job and things like that. It's going to help you with some aspects, but there's a lot you're going to have to do on your own, and communities aren't going to be a solution for that. So you have to realistically understand a what your goal is, b whether clubs, communities, hackathons, all of this actually helps you with that. If it does, great. If it doesn't, decide what actually will help you. If you can't decide, ask someone who's been in those shoes. um, Ask someone who actually has the awareness of that, and then figure out your next steps. But don't just rush towards all of these activities blindly simply because everyone else wants to. Everyone else thinks it's a good idea. We have that problem right now. Like a lot of students are constantly endorsing communities without understanding whether it's going to help them or not, and that doesn't make sense.
That's a great, insightful answer, Aditya. Uh, That's a great insightful answer. So moving forward to the next question, as we have talked about communities, you have been a part of a lot of communities in the past and now as well. So how you get involved in communities in your college and what advice you want to give to those who want to get involved in communities, because there are a lot of students who want to get involved in communities but they don't know from where to start. So
Okay, here's my question to you. Well, let's reverse this back to you.
okay,
Are you a part of any tech communities today?
tech communities. College club, are you saying?
Any clubs, any communities, anything? Are you a part of any clubs today?
Yes, I've been a part of Web3 Club
Why?
because community supports each other. If we want to learn a particular technology, and if we learn that technology in a community, then we can learn that thing quite fast because it's kind of supportive. I can also do that thing alone, but community supports and helps, and they motivate. Yes, yes.
Okay, right. I'm gonna pause you there. How does it help you move fast?
Because if I get stuck somewhere, I can ask help from them.
Okay. Now, you've told me how a community will help you after you've decided what you wanted to do, right? Why? Matlab, the first thing is why Web3 wala is the question, right? You had to figure that out on your own to decide what can help make you progress in this space. Progress, how it's helping you, you've told already. That you've answered, I don't need to answer that. First step is you have to decide what you're actually interested in. Now, for you, that was a Web3 club. For someone else, it's going to be something else.
Yes.
And that's the thing. You've got to figure out interest areas for yourself. The thing about communities is they're going to be catalysts to help you grow on a certain front or solve a certain problem. You can't look at them as the goal themselves, and that's where things go wrong. If you start looking at a community as, you know, I want to join a community because being a part of the community is the goal, that is the worst thing you can do. Figure out an interest area, figure out a space you want to learn about, and then see if there are revolving groups around it. And the moment you do that, you're going to find enough communities, right? Like, Ekans can correct me on this probably, but if suppose someone is interested in the cloud native space and is exploring Kubernetes, once you've figured out that you've gotten to that step, that's an area you want to invest in, then you're going to find communities like the Kubernetes Slack or CNCF groups or things like that, right? Um, those are a few example communities. I think you can name more on that's aside from the point. Point is you're going to have to figure out at least the tech area or whatever core interest area you want to explore. It doesn't
Yes.
even have to be a tech interest for that matter. Like um, Bangalore, for example, has board game communities, reading communities, beer communities, stuff like that, right? Um, you've got to figure out those interest areas first. First thing you do is figure out what you actually want to do in life. And then see, once you get invested on that front, then you see whether there is a support system available in that space and what kind of support system that is.
Okay, that's a great answer, Aditya. I really like the approach in which you answers these questions so beautifully. So first of all, we need to figure the interest, and then we automatically get associated with communities by exploring what is
Yeah, like
okay.
just
That's great. Yes.
meeting other people who are doing similar kind of stuff is only going to happen when you decide what that similarity is and whether
Yes.
that thing is something you're investing in, right?
Okay. So Ekansh is saying I'm a part of poker community. Okay, great, great,
Yeah,
Ekansh.
it's a
Yes.
thing. If you're
Yes.
active,
Interest. It also.
like,
Yes.
yeah.
That's great. So next question is, let's talk about FOMO. As I personally also suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out, and I think many people also suffer. So how can we reduce it from our life? I personally don't know. So please don't ask back the question from me.
So I am going to ask something.
Okay, again, I'm
Here's my
ready.
question. When you talk about things you feel FOMO about, there are normally two reasons why we feel FOMO about stuff. Okay. One, it is FOMO because it's something you wanted to do, but you aren't able to, and your friends are able to. That is reason one. You're missing out because someone else you know is able to get that benefit and you want it. The second reason we feel FOMO is it doesn't matter if it's something you want to do or not, but there are other people doing it, so you think it's a cool thing to do.
Yes, totally.
Right?
Yes, right.
One, for the first case, it is okay to feel FOMO. For the second case, it's a very big problem if you're feeling the FOMO. Because at that point, um, like let's talk about the second one first. If you're feeling FOMO about stuff you don't care about, but because other people are doing it, you want to be seen as well. That's something that's a major issue. At that point, you've got to sit down and introspect what you're doing with life and whether um, you understand where your time is spent most valuably or not. And that's because at that point you're chasing approval more than value.
Got
You're
it.
seeking visibility and approval from other people, even if that thing that you'd have to indulge in for whether it benefits you or not, it stops mattering. So it doesn't make sense, right? Like if I go to a Web3 event because there are other major people in there. um, Whether I care about it or not doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Just for example, I'm not someone who's too into Web3. If I start spending time at those events, it's not going to make sense, right? Now, if
Yes.
it doesn't make sense to be there, what is the point of feeling left out at those?
So,
And
how
I
can we
don't think
reduce
people have
this?
to spend. That's the first thing. You've got to spend time understanding whether things are valuable for you or not. Whether Web3 is a thing or
Okay.
not is not a question I want to get into. Um,
Okay.
it's a
Okay. Okay.
particularly turbulent time for Web3 right now. If you know of the WazirX issue that has recently happened,
Oh, yes, I know
I don't want
about
to get too
WZX. Oh my God.
controversial.
So
Yeah, I feel like
don't.
if I say more, it's gonna get a little too controversial. I don't want to do that.
Yes,
I've been
that's right.
opinionated against Web3 for a while. I have my opinions. It's my personal opinions, but yeah, that's a dangerous discussion to have.
Yes.
But the
So,
point is that if you're feeling FOMO about that, then that's a problem. At that point, you have to sit and spend time understanding whether you're putting time towards the right things in life or not. Now, keep that aside for now. If you're feeling left out about things you want to do, right, then the first thing is to understand why aren't you able to indulge. Now, for that, I feel like I'm gonna have to go back to you and have you give me an example as to scenarios where you might have felt left out. This is gonna be very personal, but I'm sorry, you're gonna
no,
have
yes,
to
I
give me
can.
an example
Okay.
of that.
Okay. Yes. I can give you my example. So, suppose if I want to do a thing, I want to learn a skill that I am really interested or just wanted to, and others are doing that thing or already learned that skill. I feel FOMO. Now the point is why I'm not able to do that, because some other things which I am a little bit interested about takes all of my time. So this is the reason I'm not able to do it. So this is the example which is a personal example, and I personally face this.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat once? I feel like I lost audio in the middle for a
Okay, yeah,
second.
no worries. Is I'm audible now?
Yeah.
So I'm saying I'm giving you a personal example for mine. Suppose I want to learn a particular tech stack,
Hmm.
but I'm not getting enough time because other things are taking all of my time, which I am a little bit interested about, and others, my other peers are
Okay.
do. Yes,
Thanks for mentioning that. Um, Here's the question: are the other things you're spending time on a bigger priority than this particular interest?
no,
They're
these are
not a bigger
also
priority.
important, but the priority is high for that tech stack thing.
Then in that case, again, you've got to go back to your own time management and think about whether you want to spend time doing things that aren't as important, right?
Right.
Most people, when they have this issue, it's either a time issue or it's a matter of whether you can financially invest into it or not. There are normally two reasons for this FOMO. If it's a time issue,
Yes, time issue.
then you've got to go back to your schedule and reprioritize. If things you're spending time on are not as important as the other thing, then why are you spending more time on those than this thing you want to learn about, right? Um,
Now,
Now, if it's a financial matter,
yes.
then I have a further question. Um, and this is the thing that comes up a lot, right? When we talk about people who are like, I missed a conference which would have been good for me, but I can't spend money to attend or travel.
No, it is not about financial reason, but still, I request you to ask so that attendees, if in future watch this video and if they have any kind of such similar situation, then they can get a little bit idea about it.
Yeah. Um, by the way, just before we jump into that, if anyone in the chat wants to mention their, like, if they face these problems, I'd be happy to take those up as well. But anyway, when it's a matter of not being able to invest into a certain activity, at that point, you've got to then spend time understanding what you can do to get to a position where you can invest, right? Like if your problem is I can't travel to an event as a student, is it A, you don't have the money, B, you don't have um, permissions? Parental permissions are a thing at that point as well, right? Those are the two big reasons. C is college, not allowing. Now,
Yes.
if it's the money, then understand whether spending that much money is going to give you the return for it. Right now, I could spend 20,000 traveling to a different city for my travel, my stay, event tickets, and things like that. Um, and at that point, you've got to understand, spend time thinking whether spending this much is going to get me what I want or not. If it's not 100% yes, then think about whether that money is better not spent. If it's a parental permission challenge, and that comes after the finances of it are okay, right? That's the
Yes.
first thing you got to sort out. That financially it's worth investing in. Once that is done, and then if it's a permissions issue, then see, here's the thing: I can't tell you how you got to talk to your parents. You've got to figure out how to do that on your own. If it's a college matter, then I'm sorry. Unfortunately, the only thing you can do is stay patient, and wait till you graduate or till vacations.
Yes.
Um, Here's the thing, right? As a student, you're gonna have enough commitments on you that you're gonna have to partake in whether you want to or not. Um,
Got it.
that's
Got
a
it.
big thing to understand.
Okay.
Um, you're gonna have to understand your circumstances and learn patience at that point.
Okay.
Maybe finances aren't okay right now. Maybe they will be one day.
Yes.
Maybe permissions aren't there right now. Maybe they will be one day. You're gonna
Yes.
graduate from college for sure if you're in college right now.
Yes.
That's going to happen for sure one day. So it's okay to be patient.
Just
I
be
think,
patient and wait for the right time.
yeah, like I don't think I traveled out of town for an event until I started working. Um, the only times I actually traveled out of town for any such activity, um, at least until now, probably was always if my employer supported it, or an organizing entity supported it. And I think for that matter, even today, 90% of my travel happens like that for any events and things like that. So I wouldn't spend money on a lot of things which are cool to do, and that's okay.
But still, in your college time, you are from Delhi NCR, and a lot of events
Here's the thing, right?
happen in Delhi NCR.
Um, yes, activities happen in Delhi. At the same time, there was a lot in Bangalore. Delhi is not accessible for Bangalore all the time, is
Yes,
it?
yes, yes,
At the same time, there are things happening in Hyderabad. There are things happening in Mumbai. Wherever you go, like forget that. At this point, my goals aren't even that. I'm like there is stuff happening in San Francisco and I can't get to it, right? There is always going to be a distant goal. Point is you have to understand whether it's worth it or not, right? You can always find a goal like that. Now,
okay,
yes, Delhi had a lot of stuff happening. Now, how much of it was valuable is a whole other question that I'm not going to get into. You
okay,
have to
yes,
evaluate whether the thing you're chasing is even worth the investment you make for it. And if it isn't, then step back because at that point, okay, yes, there are going to be other people there. Doesn't mean you're getting value out of it. And that's the other thing that people have to understand is that just because other people do stuff, whether it's friends, whether it's mentors, whether it's uh, other people you look up to like idols and so on, just because they do stuff doesn't mean it's going to create value for you, right? Even if it's
correct.
something you want, you've got to spend time understanding whether it's valuable or not. I know conferences that are fabulous, but I never apply to because they're great for some people, but not for me. Like, for example, the KubeCon conferences. I've never applied to a single one
Yes,
because despite how good they are, for my interest areas, they aren't the best fit. And that's okay, right? They'd be cool to attend. If I get invited for one, I'd be more than happy to join in, but I'm not chasing it simply because it's just not something I want to indulge into.
yes,
And
yes. Just got
you've
the
got to
point.
understand at that point, right? Just be a little more, when you look at those opportunities, start quantifying them better, whether uh, the amount you spend and the amount you get from it is actually correlating or not. And once you start defining things like that, once you start actually quantifying worth, um, there's a lot of things that start looking a little more different, right? That one big meetup that you saw where people were, if it didn't create enough value, then chances are you're one of the rare people who didn't waste money on it. So, you know, start
Yes,
quantifying the value of opportunities that you're feeling the FOMO for.
yes. If that opportunity is valuable and worth for me, only then attend. Otherwise, say no to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Like
So,
this
yes,
is gonna be a very low-handed dig, and I don't mean anything bad, but for example, I wouldn't go to a hackathon like event just because there are stand-up comedians at it.
yes,
Which
yes, got it.
if someone got it, they got it. If they didn't, and that's just me again. It's a personal opinion, but I wouldn't do that. So you know,
Yes, I know, I
um,
know.
you've got to figure out what is valuable to you. What's fun is one thing. What's valuable is another. You've got to figure
Yeah,
out what's valuable, and
only
um,
then choose it.
yeah.
So a
Ekansh
follow-up.
is a good question on that note, by the way. If you look in
Yes,
the chat,
yes, Akansh is saying, do meetups ever create value? I feel there are just networking events. I never learn anything from meetups. Aditya have a very good article on that. Uh,
he knows my article, by the way. He's my just for context. Ekansh is my flatmate.
okay.
Um,
Okay, that's great.
it's a very good question actually. On this note, when we look at things that create FOMO, and when we talk about value, whether meetups create value, the answer is yes and no, right? Here's the thing about meetups: they will create value for someone. For example, as an organizer, if I am organizing a meetup for Appwrite and my goal is to expand my audience while exposing about my tech, chances are if I have a big meetup with a very general audience, that's a win for me. Um, Now, when you come to an event, what are you coming for is the question, right? I, for one, don't go to a lot of meetups to learn stuff. Um, and I say so in the sense that a lot of talks you'll get at meetups are things you can learn regardless of a meetup, right? Um, if Unless it's something I can't learn outside of the meetup, education is never going to be my goal for the meetup. So at that point, yes, I am going there to meet specific people. Now there is a lot you can learn from people at that point, but that again depends a lot on who's attending those meetups. So that's the other thing to gauge whether the people at the meetup are actually people you want to learn from or not. If the answer to the content of the meetup and the people of the meetup, when you ask whether either of those groups create any value for you, and if the answer is no, then step away from the meetup. It's not going to create value for you, right? If either of those is yes, then yeah, why not? At that point, you're gonna get something back from it. But for your own sake, please don't and for your, I mean, for anyone, please don't go to a meetup just because it's offering food and snacks. You will get lunch at home, or you can buy it on your own. A sticker is very easy to get printed. It doesn't
Yes,
cost so much. You can do either of those in your own time and with your own money. In fact, it'll probably cost lesser than your cab trips for the event. Um, but yeah,
makes
don't
sense.
do events just because you know they're offering swags and certificates and stuff. Like all that stuff doesn't have any value. I mean, you need to have lunch, yes, but I mean, you don't need to be at a meetup to have lunch. Is the point. Um, Go there because there's actually some tangible value you gain from it.
Totally agree, Aditya, on this. So, next question is that I know that you have a very good following on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter. Especially on Twitter, you have 40K plus followers. Congratulations for that. And how can one reach up to that level? Some tips from your experiences because you have spent a lot of time on Twitter, and after spending, I think, 4 to 5 years, you've got 40K plus followers. So you might have come up with some tips and strategies out of your experiences that you could just share to us, which will help
I'll be
us.
very honest on this. I have no idea how it's happened.
Oh my God.
Okay, like here's the thing. Um, a big part of my following on Twitter, at least, is the nature of my work, which puts me on public forums. And just because that happens, I end up getting more visibility. It's a nature of and a consequence of my work, but it doesn't matter honestly. Um, if I'm looking at someone who I want to follow, yes, it's a nice validating metric that they may be saying something that people want to listen, but I want to look at what they're saying before I look at how many people are listening. Because, just for example, I have more followers than my current manager.
Oh
and I
my.
know for a fact that she creates far more value than I have so far, right? So if I start looking at followers as my value metric, then by that logic, I'd be more valuable than a lot of people in this industry, and it I know for a fact I'm not, right? I've got to be honest like that. So it is very much a vanity metric. It's nice to have, but I'd rather worry about saying necessary stuff about offering value. Or I mean, even if it's not about offering value, it's just I'd rather be myself than start playing social media to build an audience. Um, because if I start playing it for the audience more than about what I want to say, then at that point, is it really my social media, or is it the rest of the followers' social media is the bigger question,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Um, so for me, I just keep interacting there and engaging there regardless of whether people are seeing and people are following, and do that enough, do that consistently, as Ekant mentions. Eventually, people who like what you're saying are going to pick it up.
So just be
And
yourself and put valuable
yeah,
content out.
like exactly, just stop worrying about followers, do it enough, it's eventually going to happen anyway.
I agree, agree. Uh, so yes, we have talked about events. How can a person attending an event can leverage it as much as possible in terms of networks? Because events not offer education as much as you have already mentioned. We can get education from a YouTube video, and if
Again,
any.
some events do, by the way, just saying, some events do.
Yes, some events do which have hands-on,
Yeah.
which have hands-on workshops. I totally agree. But as you know that in India, a lot of events are happening nowadays, and most of them are not as valuable as they've seen. So how can a person or even a student who don't know about much, or it's his or her first or second event, so how can he or she be leverage that event according to you?
Okay, there are two things to look at. As I said earlier, first thing, look at the contents of the event. Are the contents of it valuable to you? Does that help you? The second thing to look at is whether the people attending are a group of people that you find valuable. Um, if the answer to either of those is yes, I would consider going forward, and I'd start charting out how best I can find value. Right. Now, if my value is primarily based on the content of the event, then I'd go in with a mindset where I want to learn, right? Which means, and this is something I've done by the way, but I'd be a front bencher at the event where I'd be sitting and I'd be making notes. And I've done that at events, I've done that at conferences, and that's totally okay to do. Um, the second thing you do is I look at who else is attending. I do a lot of research about the people who I'm going to be meeting. So when I go to a meetup or a conference, I typically know who are certain valuable people. I do enough background research about them. I understand what they're doing. I understand where they're coming from, and if there are any common points between us. So that way, I know what to have a conversation about, and I can start a relationship. Uh, yes,
Oh,
Ekant does that.
okay,
Um,
that's a great approach.
Yeah. But I mean, I do the same thing with people as well, right? I'm like, I have a certain group of people. If I see that they're going to be there, I'll give it more priority and focus,
Same as
right?
for me. That's why I'm coming to attend your event because you are the speaker.
Uh, I'm definitely happy to hear that. And,
Okay.
and like, it's just that's, what you've got to think about. Does it create enough value for you in any manner?
Yes.
After that, the next thing of course is of course to maintain those relationships, right? If I'm having a chat with people and I let it die at the event, then that's the end of a relationship, then that's not networking, that's
So
just a
how can
conversation
we
that started.
continue the chat and restrain from that relationship to die?
Right, so that's exactly why I do all that research, right? To understand what they're doing, what I am doing, whether there are any common points, right? If there is something common, you have a reason to keep communicating. If there isn't something common, then why will it sustain? At that point, you have a positive interaction, and then you wait and see if there is a point where there is something common to collaborate on,
Yes.
right? Then you've got to stay patient. But the worst thing you can do in that scenario is force a conversation where, um, one isn't necessary,
Yes.
because the moment someone forces a conversation, anyone can catch that. When someone's at the receiving end of it, it is caught. And I say this having learned the hard way. I'm sure I've forced conversations where people didn't need to have that chat. And I figured it out when I was on the other side of the table, where someone tried to force a conversation for the sake of chatting, right? Um, it doesn't make sense to do that.
Yes. Yes.
So
I
I'd
totally
rather have one positive interaction and then eventually see if there is a place to collaborate, rather than force a relation every single time I'm at a meetup.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Aditya. Now, next question. Student don't know much about burnout, and they didn't even realized it if they are burnt out. So how can a student realize that he or she is suffering from burnout, and how can one come out from this condition?
See, here's the thing: everyone realizes it. You just don't know how to name it.
No, I
If,
didn't
if you
realize it.
don't realize you're burnt out, then you probably aren't.
No,
Um,
sometimes I am overloaded, but I don't know much about burnout, but I
Here's
have
the
heard
thing,
about
right?
it.
Here's my question:
Okay.
are you overloaded to the point where you can't do anything at all?
Yes, I am,
So you are experiencing it anyway, right? Just even if you don't know how to name it.
but I don't know that it's a burnout or just I don't
Why
have
does
a
it need
good
to
mood.
be tagged for it to be real? Why do you
Okay,
need a tag on it?
so it is a burnt out.
Just because you don't know that it should be called burnout doesn't mean you aren't able to deal with things, right? You still are in that situation. So I mean, burnout's just a name or a tag for that situation. Doesn't mean you can't experience it without knowing what it's called, right?
Okay.
So it's just at any point if you're in a scenario where you've, and by the way, I've written about this as well. Let me actually throw in that link into the chat. Um, but so suppose you're in a scenario, right, where you chronically feel that stress about the stuff you're working on, whether that is in your academics life, whether that is within your workplace, whether that is with your career. It can happen in a lot of places,
Yes.
in all honesty. Like at this point, it is officially um, defined by the World Health Organization. So it's. I sent the wrong link, by the way. Let me send the right one.
Okay, no worries.
But yeah, like it's just when you're in that scenario, right? Uh, it's important to kind of pause. If you're in a scenario where you're constantly drained, you're constantly exhausted, you have increased profession, you have increased mental distance actually, from whatever you're feeling stressed about. You have constant feelings of negativity about those. You're constantly cynical about them. Your productivity has gone down. At that point, you need to pause, look at the problems, figure out what's actually causing these stresses, and then of course there are ways to mitigate that. um, there are ways like setting a structure to your routine. There are ways of figuring out time for activities outside of whatever is creating that stress. You need to figure out where you can get support from. Speaking to a therapist is also a good idea at that point. There are a lot of ways to tackle it,
Yes.
but it's just you're gonna have to start making decisions where, if suppose you're overloaded by a piece of work because you're overindulging it, right?
Yes.
um, and by the way, this when I say this, this isn't an excuse for being disciplined. It doesn't mean that we're not just talking about the minimums. We're talking about scenarios where you're exceeding the maximum amount of time you should be spending on something, right? Like it's one thing to do 8 hours or 10 hours of work every day. It's another to be doing 15,
Yes. Got it.
to the point where it's physically hurting. It's a very different story when we talk about it. So I don't say this as an excuse for discipline, but um, when you're at that point, you've got to figure out where you need to set a boundary and where you need to start saying no to things. Just because you've taken up too much um, doesn't mean everything needed to be taken on as much as you have, right? So there is individual ownership that has to be taken there. And yes, you can take help to sort that out. Um, a good way to do that, if you don't know who to call, is probably actually just speak with a professional. There are accessible services for that now. So um, that can be done very much.
Yes,
On
that's
that
great.
front, I've shared another article that I wrote a while back in the chat where I've shared a few more ways as to how I deal with it and how I recommend people to deal with it. So um, it probably makes sense to look at that for a deeper read.
Yes, yes. I'll definitely read it, and I request to all the participants that they should also do it. And Aditya, if you're comfortable with, can you share a personal experiences of yours where you deal with burnout and get out of from that
Yeah,
condition? Only if you're
like
comfortable.
I faced that scenario at work a little while back, a few months back, where post Hacktoberfest, I had an immediate slump of activity because um, mid September till end of October, I was in a scenario where I was averaging one event every 3 days,
Oh my God.
and I was left physically tired to the point where it hit my productivity. My way to sort that out was that I took a 3 week vacation from work where I was doing nothing and just relaxing. So you've got to figure out where you need to take a break or not. And once I took that vacation and I was back to my usual regular productivity. And they recognized as well where it was an issue, right? Because
Yes,
um, you overdo at one point, it's going to have a negative impact.
definitely.
So it got to me, and then eventually the only way to kind of get out of that slump was taking a break.
Okay, just took a break and introspect yourself, and then you'll eventually get out of from this
Introspecting,
condition.
indulging in things outside of work, indulging in things I was looking forward to, and just generally figuring out ways to decompress and relax in my way. Now, a lot of that includes gaming, but that's a me thing. You figure out what's good for you.
Okay, everybody has
It's different
different
for
kind of.
everyone.
Yes, yes,
But point is, it's going to happen when you remove everything from your life except that particular thing. You're going to hit a point where you're tired of it, if
yes,
that's what you're doing, right? And we all need to figure out a balance for ourselves, where yes, you do the important things, but you make time for other things in your life as well.
definitely. Uh, Thanks, Aditya, for sharing a personal experience. Uh, so we conclude with the last question, and this is quite actually good and important to my heart as well. This thing mostly happened with girls. They want to go to hackathons and events which are outstation, but they are not allowed by their parents. How can women be motivated to overcome such obstacles? I have some of my friends which are interested to go to hackathons and events, but they don't get the permission as well. So,
Okay, here's my question first thing.
okay.
Um, And by the way, I am not speaking here from personal experiences. If someone else from the chat wants to share, that's another thing. But if someone wants to go and their parents are along with them, first thing, they're not unmotivated. They're very much motivated. It's a matter of means. Um, I can't tell anyone how to talk to their parents. They know their parents best. They know what
Yes,
circumstances are at their house.
yes,
Um, Here's my thing there. When you talk about, like, I have friends who haven't been able to travel like that for stuff outstation. Let's go back to the things I said earlier, right? First thing, is the financial investment sensible? Um, it is expensive to travel.
some
Sometimes when parents prevent you from doing that, it's not because you're a woman. It's because it's
yes,
stupid to spend the money. And
yes,
I'll
yes.
be
I
honest,
know.
a lot of events are very stupid to spend money for traveling.
Yes, that's
So
it.
first thing is that. Second thing, right, when we look at other permissions, whether it's from a safety perspective,
Yes, definitely.
if an event doesn't look safe enough, and I will say this by the way from the perspective that parents are coming from a good place. I'm not going to take a scenario where you've got, like, there are broken houses. I'm not going to deny that. I don't think I can comment about it because I'm a little more fortunate. But here's the thing: if suppose your parents are coming from a place of your best interests, in that scenario, if there is a question of safety and security, has the event or you put in enough effort to assure and ensure that it is actually worthy of investing all of this money for, right? There are
Yes,
two
yes,
things. Either you haven't put in enough effort to research and understand whether it is actually a safe enough experience, um, or B, the event hasn't put in enough effort to justify it either, right? Because if it's a student focused event and they don't put in the effort for that, then I think, forget as a woman, as a guy, I wouldn't want to travel for it. Like, I wouldn't want to stay overnight at events where I feel uncomfortable and unsafe.
yes, yes,
So it's just you have to realistically look at whether they are actually safe experiences. Now, considering that is the case, have you been able to communicate what to your parents why it is in your best interests? And by the way, when we say best interest, that doesn't just mean I'll meet cool people. There is far more to it. What is the tangible actual value you gain from it? Is it actually going to help your career? Is it actually necessary for your development? Can you not grow without it? If you can't justify those things, right, they're always going to be worried and they're right to be worried.
yes,
So, those are the minimums you need to do, whether you're a boy or a girl.
yes,
If you're a student, if you are not financially independent, if you are their responsibility, you need to justify that regardless of who you are.
yes, yes. It's all about the justification. If the event is
I
safe,
mean, more than you trying to justify it, it's about whether that event can actually create all of that value.
yes,
Because that's the
definitely.
biggest question. I think a lot of people try to rush out of town for events which might not be very valuable. I'm personally not going to comment on that for a lot of people. I think we all have different definitions of how we look at value.
Yes,
It isn't as objective as it might seem sometimes, but it's a very important thing to remember, right? Um, it actually has to be valuable enough to put in that effort. So, if it isn't, do you want to chase it or not? Is the first question. At that point, you've got to grow up and understand whether it's worthy of it or not,
yes,
right?
I will
Beyond
understand.
that, it's a matter of communication, and if it still doesn't happen, then you've got to respect that and be patient
Yes,
and wait till a point
because
where you can independently do that.
you are eventually be graduating in some years, so be patient.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if an event is safe and it's not about financial condition as well, so it's everything depends on
It's a matter
justification.
of communication, whether you can
It's a matter
communicate
of
to your
communication.
parents,
Okay.
and that's necessary. That I mean, I can't like
Yes,
you
yes,
can't anyone, no one can deny that, right? If you have
yes,
to talk
yes,
to your
totally.
parents about that stuff, you can't be like non-communicative and then expect they're just gonna give you every free, every just all free will. It doesn't make sense, right? They
Yes,
do have a responsibility, and it's
yes.
important to recognize and respect that.
They do care for their children and
Yeah.
yes. So as we have already on time, if anyone has any kind of questions, they can raise their hands and we'll wrap up at 8:40. Uh,
By the way, if anyone thinks I was entirely wrong about anything, please feel free to call that out. That's not a problem either.
yes, definitely.
These are opinionated discussions. I will say I am speaking from my own experiences. Um, so if someone else is wary and they want to share, that's totally cool.
Uh, Rishika, Kalash, Ekansh, if you have any kind of questions and you want to ask, kindly raise your hand. I'll onboard you to the stage and you can ask your questions from Aditya. If you don't have any kind of questions, can you write in the chat section so that I know? Uh, Thanks, Ekansh, for coming. You've been a quite active person in the chat section.
Hey, Ekant sir is the person you should follow. Anyone here who actually wants to be a software engineer, Ekant is the one to follow, not me. I mean,
Can you,
I'm around in the community, but like he's done the stuff that a lot of people here would probably want to seek. He's not active on socials, but I mean, LinkedIn requests is something people can still do, and hope that he pays attention to you.
yes, yes, I'll definitely send connection request to him just after this. Rishika says, having no questions, session was really great. Thank you so much for this informative session,
Pretending,
Aditya. Thank you so much, Rishika, for coming. And if anyone has not any doubts, we are wrapping up the session. Thank you so much, Aditya, for accepting our invitation and for coming and sharing all the insightful knowledge out of your experiences. And I really liked your way to explain things personally. And looking forward to meet you super soon in person. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
All right.
Good
I
night, everyone.
see you all another time.
Sure, very soon. Bye bye. I hope everyone that you find some value out of this. And if you want to see such more sessions in future, do follow our community CMX Mohali. I will be coming up with a lot of sessions like these, valuable sessions, maybe uh, really soon again with Aditya on different topic. So do follow it and thank you so much.